Welcome to Thinking Green. I'm Rana, and we are experiencing kind of an unexpected twist right now. Usually at this time of year, we have nonprofits on and talk about all the great things that are happening in our city. And we're actually taking a short diversion back onto the political scene. As viewers probably know, Chris Soto, who was elected unanimously, actually, in November to be our state representative in the north part of town, the 39th district, received a job with Governor Lamont's administration. And on February 26th, we will have a special election for his replacement that's actually shaping up to be much more interesting than the November election was. So tonight's guest, with that in mind, is Mirna Martinez. Welcome, Mirna.
Thank you, Rana.
And Mirna is a sitting member in her third term of the New London Board of Education, a former board president, and also the Green Party candidate to replace Chris Soto in the Assembly seat. So we'll talk about board issues, about state issues, and let people get to know her a little bit better, even though I think you're pretty well known already. So welcome, Mirna.
Thank you, Rana.
I wonder if you might be interested in talking about, I don't know, your political path over the past 10 years. In 2009, I think you were a classroom teacher, a bilingual educator of middle schoolers, and since then you've been on the school board, you've worked with nonprofit organizations on policy, and now you're running for state office. Maybe you can talk about how that happened.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Yes, it's funny to call it a political path because it's definitely not what definitely not what it felt like at all. As you said, I'm a teacher, and like with any profession, there are different angles that people are kind of taking care of that area. And as a teacher, there are teachers, administrators, and all other people in the building. And as a teacher, and I don't remember what specific issues they were, but I remember at some point feeling like, wait, why does this need to be done this way? And the answer was policy. And not even knowing, so where does that come from? The Board of Education. Oh, well, I want to know about that, why would they decide this type of a thing, but it was really like a back of the mind kind of a thing. And eventually, after having had 2 children, I needed to take a step back from teaching full time, and just life shifted as far as availability and what worked with my schedule. Did continue working with education through different avenues, one through Fresh New London, a youth program supervisor coordinator, and then through a nonprofit, Republic Education, as an advocate for public education and for non-privatization. There are many privatization measures to be able to get money out of the system of education. And so again, working on education in different avenues. And then eventually at some point, and also as part of New London Parent Advocates, so a group of parents and community members who attended board meetings and had our base our base ideas that we wanted to pursue in the system. So eventually, I think you asked me about running. I'm not sure. I don't know. Someone asked me to run for Board of Education, and all of those pieces accumulated to I should give this a try, and I lost the first term, and now 3 successful runs later. I mean, specifically right now, like I spoke about like what planted the seed for Board of Education, for being involved. I don't really want to say politics, but policy is better. It's better.
And it sounds to me more than politics, it's sort of broadening your focus outside of the four walls of your classroom.
Right.
And thinking about, well, not just the classroom and not just even the school, but the local system. And now it
Right.
seems as though you're ready to take one step broader.
Right. Even leaving, and I use that term, I'm not quite sure if, temporarily or what, but leaving the classroom in New London to work at Fresh New London, part of my intrigue was, other than needing to have a different schedule for my own children, part of the intrigue was experiencing curriculum and applicability of learning to real life situations as you would in a nonprofit versus in a classroom where it's shaped differently, you have much more accessibility to the real life in an organization of how we're fighting for an issue in the organization, and so therefore we're learning to directly develop a base in order to be more effective at fighting for the issue. And so I wanted to experience teaching and learning in that different kind of setting, the more authentic setting in a sense. And actually, that was even prompted by, at some point I was a part of the conception phase in the beginning of the Dual Language Arts Academy. And when that school started, it was a very small school, 32 students to begin with, and my co-teacher and we didn't have a secretary, we didn't have an in-house administrator or nurse or anything. We were everything to the school. And part of the benefit of that is that it had great flexibility. We were able to constantly go downtown as the need arose. And
that's when it was located at the
at BP Learned, right. And so I think I got to experience teaching in a setting that had that accessibility to the community and the issues a little bit more, because we had that flexibility to go in and meet local artists and talk to them and connect our curriculum more authentically. So from there, not only was the classroom situation and schedule not working for my home life, my children, but I was able to take it even a step farther. So you're right, it was a bit of a broadening of how do we do this even better, or how do I learn these other possibilities about the realm that I've already been experiencing.
And if you're thinking about policy, you have the potential to change the classroom experiences of lots of students, throughout the city and perhaps ultimately, hopefully, throughout the state.
Right. So I guess the growth from education to the potential right now to other issues and the state actually came from, in August, I attended an organization called NALEO, a National Association of Latino Elected Officials, and they had grants invited, I thought it would be educators. They had invited elected officials, and the topic was education and policy, to a conference in California, in Los Angeles. And because it was elected officials and education and policy, I assumed that they would all be board members. There were people from every state coming in. From Connecticut, there were 5 individuals, and I was the only board member. The other 4 were state. There were state reps from Bridgeport and Waterbury and so on. And so it was interesting to learn about other topics and see the relationship with education. Not that it was completely new, but getting to work on it there with with other individuals who were affecting policy in a different manner was intriguing again. It was, like you said, a broadening of previous work.
And what's interesting when you mention where these state reps, come from and the areas they represent, it seems as though the cities in Connecticut,
Right.
this is a state with a tremendous wealth gap, tremendous opportunity gap, and poverty tends to be concentrated in our urban centers. And it sounds as though these legislators came from areas that have some similar problems to what we see in New London.
Right. They're all urban state reps, and I think it's part of the intrigue to me is where there's greater need, and therefore I guess more of something that needs to get figured out in order to be equitable and accessible to everyone.
Well, I think we're going to narrow a little bit and talk about some Board of Ed issues that you've been working on, cajoling people about, and getting the word out on, because that's still what you're doing.
Sure. Yeah.
So I have heard the term non-lapsing fund
Oh boy.
many times. Can you explain what that issue is and why you feel like it's important and what the status is right now?
Sure. So boards of education, we pass our proposed budget during budget season, and it goes to the city, and eventually they will approve a budget for us, and whatever that budget is, we need to either spend it at the end of the fiscal year or return whatever is not used. Typically, it's pretty well spent. Just connecting to this non-lapsing fund in New London, I believe this is, I'm not 100% sure, I believe this is the second school year right now. Yes, this is the second school year that New London public schools are responsible for our maintenance in full. Previously, there was a line item in public works to take care of our buildings, which are city-owned buildings, but New London public schools occupy. It was a line item of $515,000, and so that was zeroed out, and we are now fully responsible for maintenance. Maintenance is an interesting issue because you don't always know what's going to come up exactly. You can try to plan as best as you can, but especially in winter, as I happen to, today's Tuesday, yeah. So yesterday, walking by the Mohegan building, on the sidewalk and seeing through their front doors the flood of water coming out in this windy, freezing day, and so things like that occur. It's just life. So especially in winter, and there's the urgency of safety, obviously, and so if heaters go, we cannot have children in spaces, obviously, that are too cold. So anyway, because of these emergencies, and it's difficult to plan for something like that, the state had approved a number of years ago the possibility for boards of education to have non-lapsing funds with approval of municipality, of course. And what that would mean is, just like the municipality has a fund balance and like a savings, let's say, the Board of Education does not have that. And so therefore, if we had approved, I'm just going to pick a number, $600,000, let's say, for our maintenance, but those were all items that we can foresee the need for the use. When there is an urgent situation, we don't have a fund balance to go through to be able to deal with these situations. So we had a number of years ago requested, and a number of years ago meaning this was, I think, my first term serving on the Board of Education. The Board of Education had proposed a non-lapsing fund, so a fund in which at the end of the year, if we have some money left over, and I think it's a great thing because it encourages you to have money left over.
Right,
It
otherwise
you
you're really encouraged to just spend every penny.
Sure.
Because If you don't, it will go for a use that is not related to the schools at all. It'll go
Right,
back
right.
into
So
the
you,
city.
at the end of the year, you may be thinking, well, let's get uniforms for, these teams or something, because we don't know if next year, how we're going to do this. So it encourages a saving, and then whatever that money is left over would go into this non-lapsing fund, and so it doesn't end the fund. So it gets to get carried over from year to year, so that there could be an accumulation, just as you might do in your home, is have a savings account for certain situations.
Like a rainy day fund.
A rainy day fund, yes, yeah. A roof needs to get done or something like that. I think an example actually that I often use is that if you don't have the full amount of something, like for a roof, let's say you need $135,000 for a roof instead, and you don't know when you're going to be able to accumulate that amount, or you don't have an ability to accumulate in a fund, you might say, well, let's use the 35 that we have at the end and just do some patching. But eventually, it's actually wiser to be able to take care of the issue in completion, instead of doing a lot of patching jobs.
And it's probably cheaper in the long run to do it that way.
Right,
So
right.
really, doing the half measures just to, Band-Aid the little leaks is not even the best return on our investments.
Right. So it had to be requested, a non-lapsing fund. Like I said, I think probably 5 years ago, and the city council at the time did not approve it. And then last year, meaning last school year, we sent another version to the city council, or sent it again. It's a new council, and it was not approved again. And then, I'm sorry, it wasn't rejected. It was sent to the finance committee of the council, and it was, they tabled it. I don't know if they formally, I guess they tabled it to wait for a recommendation. I don't know if it was from their law, I believe it was from their law director, but it never came back. That was, many months went by, and it never came back for a vote. And then recently, I sent another version. I do find it a really important issue. I think we should be taking care of our buildings, and especially in any case, but if you think about the ludicrousness of it, especially right now when we're building new buildings, to not take care of them.
We really, and it's sort of a timely topic, because there's the Martin Center is in the news, and
Right.
one of the problems with the Martin Center is that it has not been maintained for decades.
Right.
And so whether a person is in favor of selling it or not, there is that problem that it's in terrible condition because the maintenance hasn't been done.
Yeah.
So what are we going to do if we move to new buildings? Are we just going to use them up till they're ready to fall down and have plaster falling from the ceiling? Or are we at some point going to change our attitude and take care of what we have?
Yeah, change our practices.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, but I will say that right now, so I brought it up again and it failed again. The reasons that were given were varied, but I think one of them is that the city would like that if there are any extra funds on the Board of Education side, would like to be able to develop their own fund balance. That's been a goal of theirs for a while, and understandably, but as in, again, your own home, you don't take care of just one area, because the city is all of ours, as the Board of Education or the schools are one portion of it. You need to take care of multiple things, so, that was one of the reasons that was given. Another one, let's see. I think there's a little bit of a discussion about where should the approval, once if there were to be a non-lapsing fund and the schools were to request use of some of the funds. And oh, by the way, I don't know if I mentioned the non-lapsing funds, all of them that have been written, and I believe that the state statute requires is that they're purely for the maintenance of schools. One of them that was suggested, I believe the one that was suggested last year or proposed last year, was actually even more specific than that. It was for the roof the roof of Harbor School, so it was very, very specific. But typically wanting to have one that's for general maintenance, not knowing what the emergencies that would arise. Anyway, so that one failed, but it looks like there's a possibility for council to bring one to us, but we'll see what happens. But it is a really important issue that I would really like to see being taken care of for our schools.
And it sounds like something that people who are watching this, like they can just talk to their counselors.
Of course.
One advantage of living in a small town is that we see our counselors all the time.
Right,
so, if you see your counselors and you think we need a non-lapsing fund for school maintenance purposes, then, it's a good idea to let your counselor know.
Right. Another issue that gets brought up often is that from the schools is for the non-lapsing fund is that because our fiscal year begins in July, ends in June, when you're starting your year, it's not because we don't know what may arise in maintenance in January or February. It's not the best time to take care of certain big projects. You kind of want to wait to know that you're not going to need that portion of your budget. But then it'd be best to use it at the end of the year, but the fiscal year ends at the end of the school year. So the summertime is a great time to actually get certain projects done, like the roof at Harbor School. They were bringing cranes in, and we don't want young children walking underneath cranes and
although some of the young children
material.
might find it fascinating to be watching
roofing material falling down,
So even if something's determined that it should be done during the summer, the non-lapsing fund could help, even just if you need a 2-month delay,
timing of projects.
So
right.
You can do it in July and August and have everything fixed when students come back to school in September.
Right. Wow. But thank you for bringing that one up. That's an important one for me.
Are there any other Board of Education issues that you think are important and timely?
Well, I think everyone's always concerned about the construction, and it looks like we're really going to be beginning this summer with the construction of the North Campus. I'd encourage people to look at the website. There is a new, I think it's called Schools at a Glance. There's a new portion, scroll down on the website, that gives you all kinds of information, but part of it is even a timeline and pictures of the construction, some like blueprinty looking, like bird's eye views of what the construction will be, about what the plans are. And I think that's an important piece that people have in the past felt not included in the plans, not knowing where we're going. And I think it really lays out a lot of the direction of where we're going. So I just want people to take a look at that.
And I think people should be aware too that in that high school campus will also house the middle school arts pathway.
Right.
So that's a little bit different, and if people want to learn more about how that is going to work out, now is a good time to find out.
Yeah. Just so that the public knows, the reason that the state is having the middle school arts pathway be at the high school with the high school arts student is because of the types of facilities that are needed for an arts pathway.
Things like auditoriums,
dance studios, kind of larger space that wouldn't make sense to replicate at both campuses.
And I think that the plan is, and I don't know it in any detail, but is to keep the middle schoolers area kind of separate. So
right.
the sixth graders aren't really going to spend their day with 11th graders.
Right. Yeah, but they will have access to the spaces that are relevant for the arts. Yes.
Now, moving, I guess, broader to state issues, now you're running for a seat in the Connecticut legislature, and I know you've been looking at current bills that have been proposed, and you're thinking about bills that, actions that should be looked at on the state level. What do you see as issues that you're interested in?
Well, just for 1 second to stay on the topic of education, and at the state level, but just not to completely leave it before we go on to other topics. Funding education equitably. I think most people know that a large portion of our general fund budget comes from ECS, which is education cost sharing. And it's a formula, I think, created in 89 or 90, and but that isn't followed, and it's much more politically motivated of where the money, what municipalities get what share of the state money for the education cost sharing, and that's a statewide priority that also impacts us here locally directly to what I'm working on right now that impacts our budget. It's about a third of our budget here in New London. And so that's just something that I'd like to see cleaned up, something that would be equitable and or relevant to the need of the municipality.
And that makes me think about general reform of how we fund our schools, because there are 169 towns and there are 170 something school districts, because there are some consolidated districts. And because schools are largely funded by property taxes, and we all know in New London, Hartford, New Haven, a lot of the cities have much of our property off the tax rolls.
Right.
So we have a much smaller pool of taxable property than the suburbs and some of the rural areas as well.
Right.
So the pilot, payment in lieu of taxes, is also a formula that I think, like ECS, is in there, but it's not funded according to the formula.
Yes, so the pilot, the payment in lieu of taxes, I'm glad that you bring that up. Also, carries us over well from topic to topic, similar to ECS. It's supposed to fund about 70% of the non-taxable, but unfortunately, the percentage that is funded has been decreasing over time. I think about a decade ago it was probably at about 43%, and we're now at about 23%. Is your average of pilot funding, and that's a huge concern for a municipality like ours. So I think we do need to not only have that be much more appropriate for being able to relieve the taxpayers and being able to fund everything that a municipality does need to fund, but also look at diversifying revenues for our municipalities so that we aren't solely depending on the taxpayer. I think right now big on the news is the state pier situation with the Port Authority having made a deal with Gateway Corporation, leaving the city out of the benefits, the financial benefits of that agreement. There was just a meeting yesterday at the Custom House about this issue, and despite it being frigid, and I mean my fingers are right now defrosting, and it's not as cold today as it was yesterday. This is hot water. There were a number of people there anxious to hear the remedies or what the details are of that situation and why New London has been left out of that. I think Luckily, Mayor Passero is really on top of this, negotiating with the Lamont administration. It is a new administration that was not a part of the negotiations that just took place or were agreed upon prior to the new administration. But I think he is vigilant on it, and I would say that also other individuals and groups are as well. And so I think it's an area of very needed pressure on this area, because it is there'll be a lot of wear on our city. And I mean, it's a huge positive thing to be able to have that
Sure.
import-export coming through our city, the employment, the commerce, all of it's a great asset.
And having a rail line nearby, I would think would have a lot of potential as well to get freight off of our highways, but it's our assets, so the city should benefit.
Right. Yeah. And it's also, yes, our use of our community, and the city should benefit. And you're right. I mean, that is another asset, the rail line. And so therefore the development and use of all of the richness that I think we all know about, but has been underutilized. We do want to take advantage of that.
So one other thing that, I don't know, there are a couple things that have been in the news that seem very inevitable to happen in this next legislative session. Legalization of recreational marijuana. We know that Massachusetts has done it. Rhode Island is, making plans. This, since this seems inevitable, does it make a difference how we do it, not just that we do it because we see the dollar signs?
It's an area that, yes, of course, it does make a difference how we do it. It actually, it's a little bit reminiscent of of state pier or whatever other issue with New London not being not benefiting from the profits of where we should be a part of profiting. With the legalization, it does look like we're going that way regardless, and the war on drug has been so destructive to our urban centers and our population of color. I think that that's the important piece in the legalization, that if this is going to take place, that we benefit through fiscally in our education systems, or in developing or in being able to benefit financially to develop the resources to be able to deal with the social issues that we already have. And I don't want to say burden, because it isn't a burden necessarily to be humanitarian, but to be the only housers and not have the not share in the responsibility with our neighboring communities. It's an opportunity for us to be able to earmark for our communities in reparation of past damages.
And I agree. I am glad that we are trying to make a difference and do the right thing in our community, but I don't want to see the community bled dry by it. I became interested in the whole drug policy issue because when I worked for Head Start in 2005 or 6, as a home visitor, I had a caseload of 12 students, mostly 3-year-olds, 1 or 2 4-year-olds, and 4 of the 12 had incarcerated parents. And, something was wrong. And these are students who now are high schoolers in New London, and who knows what extra educational needs they might have that is I won't say burdening the school system, but it is the responsibility of our school system to, make accommodations, help these students grow. When they were 3, they had, both parents in prison, and they were bouncing around from relative to relative, and DCF was not really doing its job. In one case, one of the students lost her state health insurance for 6 months, and later DSS said, "Oh, that was a mistake, sorry." That was basically the response. So these are students who are in our schools now, and I'd like to see some of the money going to having more school social workers and more opportunities for restorative practices in our schools, as well as in the rest of our community.
There are so many other topics that overlap with this, and so it is about being able to build our communities with supports rather than just the punitive and therefore destruction of people's lives. It is, if there has been, or when there has been abuse of a substance, to deal with it in a purely punitive method instead of, it connects to healthcare. And if we have the proper healthcare and systems in order to be able to, in order to be able to have treatment for people and be able to reintegrate back into life, or as you said, overburdening a prison system instead of, again, dealing with the health issues of restoring people's or dealing with the addiction. So yes.
Well, okay, so that kind of leads us into the healthcare topic in general. I know that Portugal, like a dozen years ago, decriminalized all drug use. And I think at the time the president said, this has had great results, but it wouldn't have worked if we didn't have a fine health care system to support these people. So the United States does not have a fine health care system for everyone. So what can we do in Connecticut to help that? And she sighs.
I'm honestly not sighing because I want to talk about healthcare, and the only reason I'm sighing is because I don't know. I want it to be clear that your position on the decriminalization of all drug substances, that it isn't mine. That I don't have a clear position on that, and that is, and so that's what I was sighing about. I was just wondering about whether going back to that, and I guess I have adjusted right now. Versus yes.
And I just thought of it more as something that, if we are starting to change in general our attitude towards drug use and addiction, which seems to be a trend, we're not really there yet. I'm probably more radical than most people on it. But in any case, without a healthcare system that backs up struggling people with any kind of afflictions, we're really at a disadvantage.
Yeah, no, healthcare is a. So I've been looking into learning about Husky because it's a program that, it has these 4 different tiers: Husky A, B, C, and D, and in a sense it works. It's we're able to make sure that all of our children here in the state of Connecticut and their families are able to, if they're low income and cannot access their own health care, are able to access health care. And it's super important, for attendance of schools, for living, for being able to enjoy, develop, grow. And then there's also other levels of Husky that are not necessarily for children. Husky C is for people in nursing homes and disability, and So digging into that and looking at the cost, the most expensive group that the state pays for is are those in Husky C. I hope I have this right. I think 13% of those on Husky are in Husky C, and yet I don't know if it's 50 or 60% of the cost is
Because they're
is
sort
used
of
up for
almost
that.
a self-selected high needs group.
Right, right. But so then you look at your Husky A, which are low income, and the cost is actually about $350 a month per person, which is about 4,200, I believe. That wouldn't make sense. Well, anyway, it's about a little over $4,000 annually. And what's striking about that is that, and so, I guess I just want to give the qualifier that this is separating it. You could look at figures that'll give you a higher number because it's averaging all of the Husky users, but this is separating the Husky A. So around a little more than $4,000 annually. Well, and that's the entire cost because Husky A people do not pay into the system.
Right, they don't have co-pays or anything.
No.
It's just 100%.
The New London Public Schools, for a single payer, pays, and this is the school's portion, the employee also has their portion, pays about $11,000 for the employee. So look at the savings. Look at the savings that's there.
So by going to this public Husky system, it's like a quarter of the cost.
So and you think about and savings in so many different ways. I mean, for our municipalities to buy into this larger system and be able to, we were talking about education cost sharing, we were talking about, funding for our systems, being able to have a non-lapsing fund and saving up for basic maintenance costs so that our kids have respectful environments and warm environments, don't have to wear coats or are not too warm in the beginning or the end of the year. End of the school year. And so having a healthcare system that would decrease the costs for our municipalities and at the same time have this security, this, I would say, right, for let's say young families, young people being able to stay in the state of Connecticut, knowing that if they have a small business, if they're entrepreneurs, self-employed people, that this is something that's taken care of in the state, and they can go ahead and take risks with ingenuity for themselves and for the development of our state. Also, large corporations. I think this is one that not only would it be a benefit to them, but it's a benefit to our actual people, which is eventually what we would want. I would want a corporation to be beneficial to our state. This is how we would keep them in, but it's not just a handout for them. It is for our employees, for our average citizen in the state of Connecticut. I mean, that's something that I think could be really beneficial to our state. And I think these are the long-term revenue generators because I think people immediately, or sometimes people immediately look at what the cost is. It's a huge investment to be able to say, right now, Connecticut is the third out of the country of most likely for people to be leaving the state. Third of the entire country. Vermont having the same about a similar taxable system has number one for people coming into their state because of the supports they have for their residents.
And we see on New London too, in 1960, the New London population was about 35,000. Now it's 27 something.
Yeah.
So, and New London has not lost population as badly as some parts of the state. So, we, imagine what it would do to our local tax bases all around the state if we could bring in and keep in a lot of our young people, our creative people.
Yeah. And I love the I love the small town feel of this little city, but I also want to have our empty spaces filled up. I don't mind a few more people to make the vibrant city the city that it is and needs to be and should be.
And I think cities actually, they're not like the country. You see an empty lot in a city, it doesn't make you feel like nostalgic or peaceful as you are in the country. You actually feel safer in a city when you have a lot of people around.
Yeah.
So just for the sake of the vibrancy of the city, we could use another 5,000 people motivated to come in.
Yeah.
Let's see.
I just have just a silly little aside. I've been here for about 18 years. Yeah. And when I first moved here, I moved here from the New York City area, and I hadn't lived in a house with that much space, and I live in the downtown-ish area, in the downtown area where we only have a driveway distance separating one house or the other, but I was not accustomed to that when I just moved, and it actually seemed frightening to me in the beginning. I mean, I happen to love where I am. I think it's an absolute perfect place. I love my neighborhood very much, but in the beginning, it was something to get accustomed to. I felt the great span of space between myself and my neighbors.
Yeah, that is funny. Well, I think we only have about 5 minutes left. So what I think, next week we will not be here live, but we're going to continue with Mirna. The studio is getting some renovation. So what we're going to ask people to do is email us with questions, and the next show will be more specifically answering questions from people. We have an email address, myrna4nl@gmail.com, or you can send a message through the Facebook page as well, which is something like Mirna Martinez for 39th District. It's kind of long, but you can find it on Facebook.
Mirna Martinez for New London.
For New London,
Facebook.
Okay, on the Facebook.
For New London,
And if you send a message, it does go to this email address. So for next time, we'll have, I don't know if we'll have like 3x5 cards or something with questions and answer them.
Okay.
And but in the next couple minutes,
I just have to say, I don't know if I calendared this. I don't know if we talked about this.
oh,
We'll have to calendar.
we did.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we talked about it in theory, but we didn't schedule it.
All right.
We'll have to do that. So one of the issues to get public financing in Connecticut is that minor parties need to get a whole lot of signatures. So we actually don't need to raise money, and which is good because we're not allowed to on air, but we are.
Well, you mean we don't need to because we've already raised it, not that we don't. Okay.
Right,
Yeah.
and we've actually, but what we need to do to qualify is, fill up many, many pages of these petition sheets. To get a full grant, which is what the Republicans and Democrats can get, we need about 1,000 signatures of people who live within the 39th district, which is a very high percent of the voters. It's about 20% of the voters.
So it's people who vote in New London High School or Harbor.
Right. And so we will be doing door to door. We'll be going to events to ask people to sign. It's not any obligation to vote any way or other. It's just an affirmation that minor parties should be able to participate in this system as well as the major parties. So you might be hearing from us or about us. And I just wanted to mention this weekend we are going to have canvassing. If anyone wants to volunteer, they can also use the same email address. Let's see, is there, what else? I don't know.
Do you want to mention the debates or the forums?
Oh, yes, please do. I know Neighborhood Alliance is holding a forum or debate on Friday, February 22nd. That's coming up quite just a few days before Election Day. The Election Day will be Tuesday, February 26th. The polls will be open 6 a.m. to 8 p.m., just as they are with regular elections. And usually the turnout is low for the special elections, but really this is important. It doesn't seem as it might be as important as voting for governor or voting for president, but in terms of affecting our lives, in some ways it's more important. So what other events do you know about?
And the other debate is the League of Women Voters.
Oh, I don't even have the date for
Yes,
that one.
it's Wednesday the 20th. Is the 20th a Wednesday?
Yeah,
It's
that's February 20th, correct?
right. I think they haven't. It's most likely. It seems
Okay.
like that's a date. They haven't 100% secured it, but it has gone out to candidates and the press, and they're just looking to finalize for some reason. And that will be at the Science and Technology High School.
And I'm guessing the Neighborhood Alliance one will be at the Senior Center?
Right.
Okay, so
Yeah.
the week before the election, we'll have two debates. And since there will be 4 candidates, I guess we should mention that. It's kind of an exciting race. The Democrats have endorsed Anthony Nolan. The Republicans have endorsed Kat Goulart, and Jason Catala handed in petitions to get on the ballot. And I heard today that he handed in enough, so he's set.
Mm-hmm.
So there will be 4 names on this ballot. So it will be important for people to be able to meet the candidates and differentiate between them.
Right. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming on today. We'll have to figure out when we're going to do a part 2. And, but I will ask people to bring questions because it would be really useful to know the answers. And I guess that's it for this week, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you, Rana.
Mwimbe Afrika,